Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator here, and just about an hour ago, I got my copy of Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft in the mail from Amazon. I've spent the last hour giving it a real brief perusal, and so what's about to follow is just a real most basic of impressions kind of review. Obviously, no way I've had time to actually read it to cover and familiarize myself with all the ins and outs, but just to get it out of the way, so you want to go ahead and hit like or dislike down there below based on whether or not I'm a pro Van Richten's Guide or a negative Van Richten's Guide. I'm going to have to say overall I am positive about this book. Now, obviously, there's already been some complaints out there in the YouTube spheres and online about a good deal of race swapping and gender swapping of some classic NPCs from the old AD&D Domains of Dread days. And I'm going to say that doesn't matter. Look, guys, what is D&D? D&D is a character creation system and a combat system and marginally a skill system. And that's all it is. It's just the bare bones rules of how to make a character so that everyone's kind of, on the same playing field, and then rules for resolving conflict. Everything else about D&D, settings, what the races are called, classes, everything is just decorative. It's just set dressing so that you have something to, have in your mind to fill your theater of the imagination as you play. But you could dress those rules around anything. In a way, ever since the open game license became a thing, D&D is a public domain item. If you're just looking at the just basic mechanics of what D&D actually really is, it's just a rule system. So all of this is decorative. Even more so, on top of all, the written setting fluff that is found in any, D&D campaign setting, the artwork on top of that is the most optional, pointless part of a D&D game. It doesn't matter what they paint anything in any of these books to look like, because it's up to you as the dungeon master to decide in the end how you want to use any of these things. And going back to the very beginning of Dungeons and Dragons, as an art form, as a game, as a hobby, it's always been the case that the DMs are encouraged to redress any adventure module or published setting they get to personalize it and make it their own. So if you pick up Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft and want to play it for 5th edition rules, and you don't like, a black elf lady, in control of the evil dark magic carnival, change it back. Do whatever you want. It's in the end, it's your game. And this cuts both ways. There's the people who are applauding themselves there at Wizards of the Coast for, having such progressive portrayals of women of color in their games. It's bullshit. Or at least it has been bullshit. See, one of the things I do like about this is that it's one of the first books in a long while that actually does present some settings that are not just based on Western or European historical tropes. Once upon a time, D&D used to have a really large amount of diverse human settings. From both the basic D&D world of Mystara to, the older presentation of Faerun, where the Sword Coast was just a small part of a much larger world that included Al-Qadim and Karatur. There is a broad amount of different types of human civilizations, European, Native American, African, Middle Eastern, Asian, Central Asian, Pacific Islander, that had all been portrayed in much older D&D games. In part because they had less playable races, the worlds had more room for more types of human cultures to coexist without becoming overly complex, which Mystara kind of, even then, with only having a couple of playable races also on the map, they were kind of pushing the limits of how are we supposed to keep track of all this shit. But there was a period around the time that the Satanic Panic was coming to an end where there's a mid-90s-ish kind of push, the very first blossoming of what people call woke culture, that would complain to TSR and early Wizards of the Coast right after they first acquired it about horrible racial stereotypical depictions of Asians in the Oriental Adventures game, and how Karatura is designed, and complaining about Al-Qadim, and complaining about Native American portrayal and the Atragan clans of Mystara, and all that kind of stuff. And so because of that, they kind of pushed themselves away from those settings. No one complained as long as their settings were somewhat derivative of Western European kind of stuff. And so we got, over time, an increasing focus on just the northwest part of Faerun. We get settings like Eberron put out, which are, I don't know, kind of like a Prussian steampunk kind of setting, I guess you would call it. Dragonlance fades away. They put themselves in this corner now where they find themselves, where they're only able to produce quote-unquote white settings at one point because they're a white company with a bunch of white writers, and you're not supposed to come up with a fictional version of Arabia or Africa unless you're Arabian or African in origin, apparently. And so they dropped all these settings, and then now we're at a point where people are clamoring for, you got to have more diversity in your books, you got to have all this representation. They don't want to dig up these old settings that in their minds are tainted as being racist stereotypes. They don't want to invest a bunch of time and money and risk in developing a completely new setting based on ancient African adventuring myth or something like that from scratch. Because what if it doesn't sell? What if it isn't popular? What if people call them racist again for trying to make it? So the easiest thing for them to do, the cheapest, easiest cop-out way for them to still try to pat themselves in the back and act like everything's okay, is to take established branded settings like Ravenloft or Forgotten Realms and have in the art that's in these books, that another side effect of 5th edition in general, the artwork increases the cost of the books. They look great. It helps them sell. It's great paintings, but it's also filler. It's taking away from the volume of text they're actually selling you in these books. And you look at older AD&D supplements, or you look at a lot of books put out by other game companies, or you look at books like, for instance, Palladium. All their books are dense with text and information and history and setting background information and character stuff for dungeon masters, game masters, players, whoever, to be able to mine and come up with ideas. And this is mostly just a bunch of filler space with a bunch of pretty paintings and, really thick borders. I'll just flip to let's just see if I can average page. Look at this page right here. Half of this page is actually a ripoff. It's pretty art that you could see just by running a Google search to look at pretty art. The thing you're actually buying with these books is the text. And here's just one example page. Half of it is it's a way to cut down on the amount of writing they're doing. They're saving time and cash. And then making it's some big deal that, they got a black lady in Ravenloft. In the end, it doesn't matter in any direction. Your game can be as woke as you want it to be. Your game can be as racist as you want it to be. It's up to you as the players, because once you got the book in your hands and you're sitting down with your compatriots, as long as you can all agree that this is what you want to do, you can make anything you want out of it. Because once again, all D&D really is a rule system for character creation and combat. All that being said, why do I say I like this book? It has non-European settings in it. I'm a little bored of everything being based on, Romania or England or, northern Germany, northern France, circa Charlemagne. I'm tired of that. One of the game I'm currently working on putting together is I'm taking the old Day of Alec Bar module from AD&D and using it at the basis to kind of just create my own, quasi-Islamic fantasy setting. Just have something with a different flavor, because I'm just tired of doing the same old stuff. And this book has, in the process of describing its various domains of dread, it has a lot of that. There's Egyptian ones. There's East Asian ones. There's a Native American, Central American, Mesoamerican kind of setting, a Vedic Indian type setting. It's great. I hope to get time to be able to read more in depth into all this. The things that are also good about it, it only has 3 new races, but they're not bad. You have the half vampire, dampire types. They also have a reborn, which seems to kind of just be like another version of the Revenant from 3rd and 4th edition. And they have something called a Hexblood, which is kind of like a hag version of a tiefling, but from what I've looked at, they're not born that way. It's because of like the influence of hags and hag magic on you as a child or something that causes you to grow into being a Hexblood. That doesn't seem like a bad thing. It's got some couple new backgrounds. The investigator in particular, I think, looks nice, and it kind of ports over supernatural gifts from Mystic Odysseys of Theros in the form of dark gifts. Mixed feelings on those. It's another way to definitely add some more character flavor, but also it's another layer of empowerment on a game that is already like arguably way overpowered on all of its characters. So we'll see. So yeah, I guess that's about all I have to say for now. It looks good. If you're that worried about them gender flipping or race flipping NPCs from a 30-year-old source book you remember, like, who cares either way? It's not an accomplishment and it's not an attack on you. You have control over what all these things are. You can completely rename the character and still just use the same stats. It's the whole point of this is the fact that you get to personally customize it however you want. The art in this thing has 0 influence over what you do. So I guess that's it. It's worth checking out. It provides some interesting options. Like all things, it's probably really best for with like a lot of D&D modules and supplements is it's full of little things, ideas, and resources that you can pirate out of it and put into your own homebrew, which is in all likelihood what I'm going to do. And so, yeah. Internet gold, people. Internet gold.